now to our top story. Jury deliberations resuming this morning in the baby Evelyn murder trial for Megan Boswell. The jury out for almost 3 hours. Now, before they began deliberations, they got to hear the all-important closings.
Ladies and gentlemen, and I'm asking you today, 5 years later, February 2025, to show Megan Boswell that her stories have caught up with her. The evidence shows that the defendant, this person is the only person responsible for her child being dead. You heard it straight from Dr. Malushnik. Evelyn shouldn't be dead. Evelyn should not be dead.
She's not in Megan's shoes. She's not out there living in that single-wide trailer. That's not her life. She's not been raised by drug addict parents, a dad that beats on her mom constantly, and seen that growing up. She's not seen that. She can't put herself in her shoes. It's not fair to say she murdered her child because she didn't grieve right. I resent it. You should too.
All right, let's talk about this. What did you think of the closing arguments and who's going to win this case? I want to bring in our legal eagles now. With me, celebrity attorney John Phillips, and want to welcome in a brand new attorney guest. You all know and love his dad, attorney Chase Brown, Michael J. Brown's son, who's followed in his father's footsteps, served as a prosecutor doing criminal defense work now. And Chase, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show this morning. Welcome. So let's start with the closing arguments. I want to know what you both liked, what you didn't like, what you found effective. Kind of just give us your takes, please. John Phillips, would you start us off?
Look, you had methodical and you had passion. And so those are kind of the hallmarks of a very good closing argument. You know, as Chase will experience here in his career, and his dad, did so well with it. It's, lawyers are storytellers first. And so you've got to tell the story, and you can't just stay in the same voice because you'll lose the jury. And, the defense attorney there was almost full throat. And so, they laid out their cases. Both sides are going to stringently disagree. There were some shots made at attorneys, which you're not supposed to do. But, I think the state's proven its case, but it was great presentations.
John, thank you for that. And just wanted to note something. You see the clock up, ticking on your screen. They just went back in the room as you were answering with your analysis, John. So here we go. We're getting close to that 3-hour mark. Chase Brown, you've got to learn from the best. Tell me what you thought of the closing arguments. Were you impressed, unimpressed? What stood out to you?
I definitely was very impressed. There's always a lot of evidence in a murder trial, so it takes a lot of time to go through that. And I do agree. You need to bring in voice inflections and keep the jury engaged throughout the entire time. So the passion from the defense attorney is changing his voice, changing what he's saying in terms of his volume is very effective. So I think it was great. And then always that prosecutor is always going to walk right up to the defendant and point right at her, and that's in every trial. So that was great as well. And she took her time, was very quiet, and pointed right at her, which is very effective. So I loved both sides, actually.
And I appreciate your comments very much, Chase. I was a trial team kid in law school, and the vocal variation, like you hit on, is something that they teach you. You can't be quiet the whole time and monotone. You can't be screaming at the jury. You have to have that variety, like you said, which is effective. And then the theatrics, the pointing at the defendant, being unafraid. That really says a lot when you're a prosecutor. Let me play a clip for you both. Here, this is some figurative finger pointing, shall I say, going on at Hunter Wood by the defense. So they were trying to say that this is who may potentially have been responsible. Let's take a look.
His dad said that he was schizophrenic. I asked him, is he schizophrenic and have hallucinations? He agreed with me on that. He also agreed with me when I asked him if he talked about using an aluminum foil or tin foil. And he said, yeah, he talks about some off-the-wall stuff. Ask yourself, who's more likely to have wrapped that child in tinfoil? The child's mother that has cared for the child, taken care of the child, or the boyfriend who's schizophrenic?
All right, John Phillips, what did you think of the defense theory and attack here in this case, saying that Megan did the disposal of baby Evelyn, embrace those bad facts. Megan lied. Megan wasn't the best mom, but didn't do the homicide. Do you think that was the best approach?
I mean, it was an approach, right? The best approach, probably not. But you take the facts as they come, and you have, you look for somebody worse than your bad guy, and here Hunter fit that, and there's some. I think there was lack of a DNA test and refusal that kind of gave some room for reasonable doubt towards Hunter. But again, with the period this child was missing and where she was found and the fingerprint on the tinfoil by Megan, there's plenty there to otherwise explain. And again, if a baby dies from SIDS, you would expect contemporaneous reporting and freaking out, not, oh, where'd she go? It just, none of it makes sense.
Right, John, you're exactly right. When you hearken upon your common sense, you think, well, and what reason would she have to cover it all up and then try to convince America that she's the victim here? Chase Brown, hearkening back to your time as a prosecutor, when you have the defense really point to a specific theory, as they've done here with sudden infant death syndrome, it makes your job a little harder, doesn't it, when you've got to not only prove the case, but then refute what they've put forward. Do you think that this prosecution team has done enough to put to bed in the jury's mind the idea that baby Evelyn couldn't have died from SIDS?
I definitely think they have. They are disproving, in a way, all of the other suspects that the defense is going to throw at them. The judge is always going to give an instruction that that the defense doesn't have to prove anything, but the jury is always going to want some sort of explanation and rule out other people, because they're always going to wonder, well, if she didn't do it, then who did? And the prosecution did a great job of showing that really she is the only one responsible. They showed that all these other people the defense are going to throw out there are not the ones who did it. So they did a good job in ruling out other people, which they don't necessarily have to do, but it's definitely a great strategy, and it was effective.
Chase, thank you for that. So now here we are. We're at the 3-hour mark officially. John Phillips, if you had to predict which way the jury's going to go, what would you say?
Guilty. It's that room. My first job was law clerk for a judge, and I got to be in that room sometimes. I'd take out the trash or get drinks, and I'd get to hear little nuggets. And you never, we want to put our common sense and what we think they're doing, and you never quite know what they're doing. You got 6 or 12 random people thrown together, and they've watched this trial, and some were paying attention and some weren't. But again, jurors are good at spotting liars. And even though she didn't testify, she didn't have to testify. They can see from the buildup of her case, despite her attorney's passionate, storytelling, that something happened to Evelyn, and it's ultimately a mom's responsibility to fight for their child. And here, that didn't happen.
Right, sharp points, John. Thank you for that. The jury going through 20 counts. So just as a reminder, they've got a lot to go through on the verdict form. Chase Brown, would you give us your prediction for this case, please?
I tend to agree as guilty also. There's a lot of, I would say, circumstantial evidence, but it always comes back to common sense and what really makes sense here. And I think that a huge part for the case is the fact that there was a lot of lying. The stories kept changing, and Megan couldn't give a straight story, and the jury's really going to take that into account. And they're going to say, if she really didn't do this, she would have just said right away and given one theory, but she keeps changing her story. So it doesn't make sense for her to keep changing her story, and I think the common sense is going to ultimately prevail to that guilty verdict.
I think you're right. Attorneys Chase Brown and John Phillips, so glad we have you both on the program this hour. Stand by for more cues, please. We're going to hit our